In this video, we're going to consider media choices. We'll cover two topics. First, the impact and influence of your choice, and then second, the channel choices that are available to you. At the end of this training module, you'll be able to define the impact and influence in terms of choosing a channel to communicate a risk message. You'll be able to state the pros and cons of different channels and list when to choose which channel. When you choose a channel for your risk communication messages, you have to consider the impact and the influence. The impact refers to how widespread the impact of your message will be, and influence refers to the kind of persuasive influence, that is, the credibility the channel has. Here are some survey results from the American Press Institute in March 2014 that will help you think about impact and influence. This particular graphic is showing us the time of day that people seek their news. The green bar is general news attention and the gray bar is in-depth news attention. You will notice that the most common form of seeking information is all throughout the day. In the afternoon is the least common time for people to be seeking information. Notice also the relative heights of the green bars and the gray bars. People are looking for in-depth news attention in the evening, all throughout the day, and to a certain extent in the afternoon. General news attention is what they seek in the morning and the last thing at night. A few decades ago, if you were going to communicate with the public, television, radio, and newspaper would be the media that you would have to master. You can see from this survey that the number of devices people use now is far greater in number. The laptop or computer is the second most common way of obtaining news information. The cell phone is the fifth most common. Notice that tablets, smart TVs, or game consoles, and e-readers are also means of obtaining it. Different audiences will rely on different devices to obtain their information, and so that's one reason why you need to know your audience to know how they obtain their information. We've seen how the time of day and the device choice can influence the impact of your message. The influence has more to do with trust, however. And here's a graphic that shows you the sources that people trust the most. Electronic news alerts and news directly from news organizations, along with search engines, are the top 3 trusted sources of information. Social media, word of mouth. Consequently, their influence will be reduced. Here are results from a June 2013 Gallup poll where U.S. adults were asked where they prefer to get their news. Notice that television leads the pack at 55%, the internet with 21%, print media at 9%, radio gets 6%, and a smattering of other sources. Within the television category, all news networks seem to attract more attention, and that's consistent with the first graph we saw, where people like to get their news throughout the day. Print media, newspapers provide 6% of the news for folks. Specific papers, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, come in for 1% each. Other specific newspapers were named for 1%. Radio provides 6% of the news, and word of mouth and non-specific media account for another 3%. So if you rely on one media source, you are bound to miss a large number of people. To be effective, to have impact and influence, you have to use multiple channels. So let's have a look at some of these channel choices that are available. There's bad news and good news. Is an unheard message a bad message? Well, that depends. If there is an imminent risk in the environment and people run the risk of illness or death, you've got to get the information out immediately and never try to hide this information. The Tylenol murders in 1982 are an example. The makers of Tylenol were very aggressive in cooperating and getting the message out and initiating a massive recall, but not enough people heard the message, and there were still some residual deaths before the product could be removed from the market and enough people became aware of the risk. Your channel choice all goes back to knowing your audiences. You have to ask questions like, where is my audience? How do I reach them? Where do they get their information? What do they listen to? What do they read? What radio or television stations do they tune to? And what other communications do they use? This is information that you have to gather before an event. There are pros and cons of various channels, and they might change from one situation to the next. This is where you have to consider impact and influence. Interpersonal communication may be extremely effective, but it also could be very time-consuming and extremely expensive. So consider television, radio, and print, but also consider that if you rely on those media, you may be missing younger people who rely on internet sites or blogs, email, their mobile phone or text messaging, tweeting, and chat rooms. So make sure you know what your various audiences use, and then choose channels accordingly. If money was not an issue, you could spread your message through many channels. But most likely you're going to have to make choices. Depending on how fast you have to act, you might not have time to develop a public service announcement. So you're going to have to use a different channel. This is when you need to consider both the impact and the influence of the channel. And that is something that you can gather information on before the event. There are other things that you have to consider as well. For example, does your spokesperson have credible and effective nonverbal cues? If the answer is yes, then you want to take advantage of those skills and let people see your spokesperson. But if the answer is no, you might prefer print or other media. Effective communication skills can be taught, so it might be important to choose to train your personnel to help enhance those skills. For effective risk communication, you want to foster interpersonal relationships with your various publics and collaborate and coordinate with credible sources in the process. This will help both your impact and your